now come to the debate on High Speed 2. Andrea Leadsom to move.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm delighted to have the chance to hold this debate today, and particularly grateful to all those members across all sides of the House and across all sides of the debate who've turned up here to support this discussion of HS2. And it is incredibly important, Mr. Speaker, because it involves £32 billion of taxpayers' money. And I'd also like to say how delighted I am to see that the Secretary of State, my honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Transport, is not in his place, because as an eternal optimist, I believe he's holding his decision until December, as he certainly should, and that he is keen to listen to the debate as it progresses today. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that not just you, but also many members and right honourable members have taken a great interest in this debate. And in particular, I'd like to mention my honourable friends, the members for Lichfield and Kenilworth and Southam. Now, it's extremely fashionable, Mr. Speaker, for those who oppose HS2 to just be dismissed as NIMBY. And I want to make clear that I'm here today not just as a concerned constituency MP, but as somebody who's had 25 years in finance, including project finance, and who is determined to defend the taxpayer against what I believe is an unjustifiable and eye-wateringly expensive project. And I'd even add that if this route was going from Truro to Paddington or from Leeds to Edinburgh, I would still be here today defending the taxpayer. Now, ironically, when I first heard about HS2, I thought it was a superb idea. It had so much promise, and yet 18 months on, all of the proposed benefits have fallen away one by one, and there doesn't seem any hard evidence that spending £32 billion of taxpayers' money can truly be justified. For example, there's no evidence that this project will actually cure the north-south divide. In fact, from France, Germany, and from our own HS1, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that, in fact, high-speed trains can suck development out of the regions and into the major cities. And I have this intuitive concern about the point-to-point nature of the project. The north isn't a place, it's a region. Now, those directly close to the terminals will, of course, benefit. But it's not clear to me, in a moment I will, but it's not clear to me how those outside that area can directly benefit. And in fact, in my own old constituency of Knowsley South that I fought in 2005, for example, speaking to my old constituency chairman today, his view is, Knowsley South will end up paying their share of it, but they will get little, if any, benefit. I will give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you for giving way to me. Can I correct you on one point? The North is not a region. It's made of 3 regions, the North West, Yorkshire and Humber, and the North East, all of which have their own identities that I hope you will respect.
I thank my honourable friend for that point, and I most certainly do respect the right of people in the North to absolutely economic regeneration. And I'm speaking as much for them as for people in Cornwall and people in the Isle of Wight when I say that £32 billion on this project is the wrong use of taxpayers' money. And now I'd like to make some progress, if I may. I'll make some progress for a minute. There's no hard evidence to say that it's going to reduce unemployment in the north. HS2's own estimate of 30,000 new jobs show that there will be 73% of those 40,000, I hear from a sedentary position, 40,000 new jobs, but 73% of those will be generated in and around London, Mr. Speaker. That's not in the north. And not only that, but every one of those jobs will be associated with £300,000 worth of costs. That's around 5 times as much as the cost of job creation in other infrastructure projects. I just want to make one more point, then I'll give way. And then, Mr. Speaker, on HS2's green credentials, and in case you think I'm making this up, again, it's by HS2 Limited's own admission, at best, HS2 is carbon neutral. So that leaves me pondering whether £32 billion of taxpayers' money spent on a project that essentially just cures the capacity problems on the West Coast Main Line is good value for money. Well, blatantly, it is not. And I'm not alone in thinking this. Organisations like the RAC Foundation, the Institute of Economic Affairs and the Taxpayers Alliance are all seriously challenging the business case for HS2. I will give way to the Honourable Lady.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. Crossrail for London was given the go-ahead by this House on a consensual basis. Surely what's good enough for London is good enough for the rest of the country.
I'm glad that the Honourable Lady raises that point, because that is just sheer ludicrous nonsense. And anybody who has any knowledge whatsoever of looking at a project and making sure its value for money would say that that is nonsense. This is not our money. This is the taxpayers' money. This belongs to the country. We should not spend money on the grounds that we did it for Crossrail, so let's do it for HS2. That's just nonsense. No, I want to make a bit more progress, please. So I hear the argument, lots of countries have high-speed rail. We need to do it to keep up with them if we're to compete. But the truth is, France, Germany, China are very different to us. They have far greater landmass, much bigger distances between cities. Their high-speed rails follow existing transport corridors. And of course, their non-high-speed trains are extremely slow, unlike our existing intercity trains that are already technically high-speed, with a capacity of 125 miles an hour. I also hear arguments that we should replicate the fabulous experiment with HS1, and yet there again there is a wealth of evidence to suggest that commuter services running parallel to the HS1 link have become more expensive, they have far more stops, there are far fewer trains going along that line to subsidise HS1. And in fact, even the chief engineer himself of HS2 Limited said to me that as a Kent commuter, he's had to get used to more expensive train fares to subsidise those using the HS1 service. And then, Mr. Speaker, there is that killer argument, if all else fails, that, well, this is about a vision for Britain. This is like the great Victorian railways. This is like the fabulous post-World War II motorways. Well, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that argument. The Victorian railways were largely paid for by private funding. And yes, the motorways are fabulous, but they benefited every town and every village in this country because they have junctions every few miles. Whereas with HS2, every family in Britain will pay £1,000, but 99% of people in this country will use the service less than once a year, and the wealthiest will use it 4 times more often than the poorest in our country. That is a massive skewing of resources, of scarce resources. I will give way on that point.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. Would you not agree with me that although £32 billion is a great deal of money to spend on an infrastructure project, it is probably a very welcome amount of money to spend on the supply side of our economy, but that it could possibly be better spent on more local projects, such as the Starport Relief Road in Kidderminster? Not entirely 32 billion, but it's 75 billion.
Road with 32 billion.
My honourable friend makes a good point, and it would be a very, it would be a fabulous relief road for 32 billion. But it is a very serious point that there is a huge opportunity cost to spending this amount of money on that project. So I want to turn now, in a minute, to the business case for HS2. HS2 Limited claims there is a net benefit ratio of 2. That means £2 of return for every pound spent. And that is pretty much the minimum you could expect from a rail project. But even that modest claim makes some enormous assumptions. For example, a core and ludicrous assumption is that the time spent on a train is completely wasted, and therefore any minute spent on travel saving can be attributed a value in pounds. Now that wouldn't matter so much, except that more than 50% of the 20 billion return claimed for this project comes from the time savings. And that is quite simply ludicrous. A second enormous assumption is the passenger forecast, which HS2's forecasts are heroic when compared to Network Rail's own assumptions over a similar period. Surely we should learn the lesson of history. Eurostar in 2009 had only achieved 37% of the passenger numbers forecast when HS1 Link was built. We simply cannot continue to make these massively optimistic forecasts, and the Public Affairs Committee took the DfT to task on this point, and the DfT agreed they would put in far greater downside assumptions in their next infrastructure project. I will give way one last time.
To the lady, if she represented a constituency further away from London than Northamptonshire, she would indeed value the time for businessmen getting to meet their business context more quickly. And has she not seen the PricewaterhouseCoopers assessment that within 3 years of being completed, the government could cover its costs and get £6 or £7 billion in addition by floating the railway to the private sector?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that intervention. And has he seen the McDonald report that shows that actually increasingly since the advent of Wi-Fi and internet, the value of time spent on a train is actually increasing exponentially every year, and that actually it's ludicrous to assert that there is no value of time spent working on a train. So I want to carry on. I want to carry on now and make some more progress. Mr. Speaker, families up and down the country are feeling the pinch desperately. We're in an economic crisis, and yet this project, even before 2015, when a single track is laid, is costing the taxpayer £1 billion just to pave the way for HS2. And then finally, the ludicrous time frame involved, Mr. Speaker. Nothing is going to get built before 2026. When I commute between Euston and Milton Keynes in peak hours, as I often do, it's not a case of can I get a seat, but it's a case of can I physically get standing room on the train. There is a massive capacity problem, and it's right now. It cannot wait till 2026, and it certainly cannot wait 21 years until the full Y is done. Now, Mr. Speaker, man may not land on Mars by 2032, but it is entirely possible that there will be technological changes by then that mean that HS2 is out of date before it's even finished. I will give way.
Thank my honourable friend. Would she not accept, however, that it was a manifesto promise which was extremely valuable to people like myself who were campaigning against a third runway at Heathrow? And we were going to put people on trains, not planes. And phase 2 of this project will deliver precisely that.
I thank my honourable friend for that, and frankly, all I can say to her is that when the facts change, we should change our minds. HS2 has not fulfilled its early promise. We simply cannot say, yes, we'll spend £32 billion, because in our manifesto we broadly scoped out something that looked like it would deliver the earth. So I won't give way. I won't give way again. I'm sorry, but lots of people want to speak. Now, I'm no rail expert, Mr. Speaker, but there are lots of people who are certainly rail experts, and they have put forward a broad range of different options that the government and the DfT should be looking at as an alternative that would give more jobs, faster, more capacity, and would improve our existing rail infrastructure. And I just want to mention a few of those. We could lengthen existing trains from 9 carriages to 12. We could convert more from first class to standard. I won't give way again. We could look at solving the bottlenecks and pinch points that are so frequent along routes that actually slow down the system and give us less capacity. We could look at reopening old branch lines, particularly those that would enable passengers to switch between the East Coast, West Coast main lines and the Chiltern line. That would actually solve part of the problem in the firewall argument. We could look at solving the artificial peaks in demand that are generated by the appalling fare structure that we have. We could even look at a new line just between London Euston and Milton Keynes so that the West Coast main line could be dedicated to taking passengers to the north of England far faster and on a far more frequent service. I will give way.
If you give it away, because it just strikes me that her argument is HS2 is a really bad idea, but it's all right if we build an extra line between London and Milton Keynes. Well, is she then saying that actually those of us that live in the north and in the northwest and the Yorkshire and Humberside actually shouldn't be allowed to travel and can't travel on trains? I'm amused.
Well, if the Honourable Lady had listened to what I said we should look at building a dedicated local line so that the West Coast main line could be exclusively available to those wishing to travel fast to the north of England. That is an intercity train. I mean, it's just simply nonsense to say we should build a dedicated 32 billion line instead of looking at a proper solution to the capacity problem. And anyway, there is also the final potential solution we should be looking at, which is to give the right spending priority to rolling out superfast broadband. Now, Archie Norman, who is the chairman of ITV, has said, scrap HS2 now and announce instead 17 billion of spending to bring about the biggest improvement in history of Britain's existing railways. Mr. Speaker, I am genuinely sorry to be so at odds with my own government and with many members over this project, but we have to seriously consider whether spending £32 billion of taxpayers' money on a project that will deliver nothing until 2026 is worth doing. In my view, it is not. It is monumentally expensive. The timescales are so long as to become satirical, and HS2 as a result risks being a vast white elephant that is out of date before it's even completed. HS2 is not visionary, it is not green, and it is definitely not economically sound. We can and must do better. So I urge the government in the strongest possible terms to look again at this project so that it doesn't become a triumph of political will over economic sense. Thank you.